President Trump apparently appears to be threatening that there may be more tariffs on the horizon, just when countries are trying to grapple with the latest tariffs introduced. Nigeria got 14%, other countries got even more, the EU got 20%. But more importantly is how this will affect you, right? How this will affect you staying thousands of miles away from the US. And we want to focus on food security in Nigeria, because Nigeria imports a lot of machinery, fertilizer, and even food products. So how will this impact if Nigeria chooses to maintain status quo or do some reciprocal tariff move? We're joined on the program by the country director, Oxfam in Nigeria, Mr. John McKenna, is live in our Abuja studio. Good morning, Mr. McKenna. You're welcome to the morning brief. Just get right into it. I know you've had experience in Action Aid, or USAID rather, now Oxfam. So speak to us first. When you see the tariffs, how do you see this affecting countries that are deemed third world or developing country, with the US on its own part is trying to balance the trade deficit, but there are countries that are struggling even before that. Now there's more load on them. So how do you see this affecting them?
Good morning indeed, and good morning to all listeners. So this whole debate about tariffs in Africa and many other countries globally, I think there will be a lot of impact that will be there, the negative impact, and in Africa in particular. So perhaps we could look at Africa and then zero in terms of Nigeria. So first thing is looking at who our main trading partners are globally. So yes, US is one of those countries that Africa and Nigeria have been having trading relationship with. So the issue of tariffs is going to impact on a number of cases. So first of all, perhaps we could look at it from short-term impact. The short-term is that there will be reduction of exports that will be doing to the US. Yes, there might be demand from the US business community in terms of what we have been exporting to the US, and probably that's an area where we should also be capitalizing on. Now, reduction of the exports would result into a number of results. One is basically reduced profits that the companies that have been exporting to the US would be experiencing. That would probably lead to the reduction of employees. But at the same time, also, we should be looking at a reduction of tax collection by the government, because the government is the main duty bearer. The government has a lot of responsibilities to ensure that its citizens are able to sustain themselves. So, number of issues. So, for example, when it comes to humanitarian response, the government is supposed to be the main player. But with reduction in taxes from trading and even from pay as you earn because of reduction of employees from companies that have been exporting, that will have an immediate impact. So you could look at different areas. For example, security as in state security. The government is supposed to be providing those services, road construction, water provision, and many other areas. But because of the reduction in tax collection, all these areas are going to be affected. Now, specifically when it comes to issues on food security, some of the exports that we're doing to the US are agricultural-related products. So the reduction of that export of agricultural products will have an impact in terms of our own food security at local level in the country, because not many people will be able now to get what they've been getting, the profits they've been getting from the exports, and that will reduce production. Now, reduction in production of food-related products would lead to challenges in terms of food security in the country. So these are things that needs to be looked into. I earlier said this is kind of an immediate results, an immediate impact. However, long term, as a government, as a country, we should be looking at alternatives. What would be the alternatives? I mean, the US, when I was reading one of the articles, it talks about, I think on average we have about 2% of our exports to the US market. So if we are only looking at that kind of percentage, then we should be looking at what would be the alternatives. Would Europe, other countries in Europe, be able to take on some of these? Asia, would they be able to take on some of the products that we've been exporting to the US? If we look into that, then probably long term, we should be right. We should not be affected per se, because we have another market that will be able to fill the gap that has currently been created. But immediately, because it will take a while before we are able to identify new markets. On the other hand, when you compare the tariff rate for Nigeria as compared to other countries in Africa, I would conclude personally that I think the exports that we have to US from Nigeria are things that the US government is also feeling like it will take them time to be able to fill that gap. And that's an advantage, I think, for the country to be able to negotiate well. I mean, think about countries like Lesotho with 50% tariff rate and compared to the rate for Nigeria. I think that's something that we need to also to be looking at.
But Mr. Makina,
and negotiate. Yes.
Yeah. Isn't the impact on food security in the country supposed to be minimal, particularly when you consider reports that the 14% tariff impact more on crude oil, which forms 90% of Nigeria's exports to the United States of America? So why should we be worried to that extent about how this would impact on food security back home? And maybe you want to elaborate more on that.
What I was saying earlier is that from the exports that we have, there is tax that goes to the government. There is also tax that's collected by the government from the employees. So I earlier indicated that reduction of exports, whether we're talking about crude oil or other gas products, that tax, if affected immediately, there will be a reduction of tax collection by the government, and therefore reduction of services that the government is required to provide to its citizens. That's where I'm coming from. Now, if people also, employees have been affected in terms of reduction in numbers, yes, there will be reduction again on taxes from income tax that was being collected earlier before the introduction of the tariffs, which is something that we should be worried about. Immediate impact is something that we need to work on, and yes, will be impacted, but long term is what I'm saying. The government and the other players should be able to find the alternative market and therefore get back to where the situation was before the introduction of the tariffs.
Okay, so let's look at it a little bit more, maybe slightly differently. I remember listening to, I think, Lawrence, that's the name, Lawrence Wong, this is Prime Minister of Singapore, when he was just unhappy about the tariff, because this tariff looks like both for foes and allies, it's on everybody. He was talking about, if you look at some of the reasons espoused by Donald Trump as to balance of trade, for them, for instance, as Singapore, in terms of services, you know, the Americans, they are gaining more, but it's more on the goods part. And then when you come home, our Minister of Finance had said that it may not be significant. In one breath, he said that. The other breath is saying that they are going to ramp up non-oil revenue sector to cushion the effect of whatever tariff is coming through. So perhaps I wanted to find out from you, what are the kinds of products that is non-oil that we export, and how that will affect some level of viability for exporters within the within Nigeria, to those people that may be expecting to consume those products in the Americas, for instance. How much of impact will this be? Because, of course, price is going to go high. But I'm talking about the significance of the tariff.
I think there are a number of agricultural products. We're talking about things like cocoa that have been exported, spices, and all those things that have been exported to the U.S. But at the same time, we should also be looking at other products that are coming in from the U.S. into Nigeria. For example, wheat, which is coming into the country for making things like bread and other things. But this is an opportunity that we should also be looking at in terms of the long term. Long term, basically, where we should be looking at how do we kind of enhance the utilization of the local products that we have for food. I mean, things like cassava that we're growing, a lot of cassava, rice that we're growing, sweet potatoes that we are growing, Irish potatoes. I think these are things that we should also be capitalizing on. And if we kind of enhance on that, the impact would be minimized. And that's what we should be aiming to have. The key is basically looking at, are we able to kind of go that direction? I mean, as I said, long term, yes, but immediate term, perhaps that's an area that we need to kind of sit down and bang our heads. The government is the main player, needs to look into that, bring in different industries to kind of look at all that and come up with strategies that should be aimed at minimizing the impact of how the country will be affected, and in particular looking at issues of food insecurity. Now, there are already issues that we've been grappling with. I think last time we've been talking about Right to Food Act and whether everybody in the country, despite talking about that, is able to attend that. And it's clear that many people in the country are not able to kind of meet their food security requirements.
Right.
And these are things that we need to be looking at as well as a country to ensure that now with this new development, because it's going actually to kind of make things worse. How do we go about ensuring that we can achieve that?
Well, Mr. McKenna, looking at Oxfam's history, Oxfam is basically a British, well, at the end of the day, Oxfam derived its foundations from, British idea, or an idea from Britain. It's a 21 independent NGOs yet, yes, but the goal was to basically alleviate World War II induced hunger and poverty. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's as much as we know about Oxfam. And now there are fears globally that the latest tariffs and the moves by the U.S. government, U.S. president, might be tilting the world towards another war. Some fear possible World War III. And seeing that what you're doing is basically to resolve something that came off World War II, do you share those concerns that people have, seeing the trajectory of things? Is that something you fear? And what might the world be grappling with in the coming years if we don't sit down and have a conversation around these issues?
So Oxfam indeed started during the Second World War II, and the aim was basically to overcome poverty and suffering that was going on then. And it continued up to date because issues of poverty and suffering are still going on. So as an organization, Oxfam sides against poverty and suffering. And as an organization, we believe that it's not just one organization, neither one entity that can actually overcome poverty and suffering. As such, Oxfam believes that working with others, and others would mean other organizations, other government entities or government ministries, will be able to overcome poverty and suffering. I mean, this is where we should be bringing together our different ideas, our different strategies to be able to do that, to overcome poverty and suffering. And this is very important. Whether what we are doing now or whether the tariffs can lead into the Third World War, I think that's something that needs to be discussed later. I wouldn't share that perception at the moment. But I mean, I still believe that together, including the media, actually, because there are certain poverty issues, certain challenges that we see globally, where the media would have a role to play. I mean, the whole issue that we talk about in terms of influencing and advocacy, the media has a major role to play as well, so that they're able to bring about sensitization and we could prevent some of the suffering that we see globally.
And indeed, we're playing our role as much as we can, advancing these issues, through the public space and for public scrutiny. We just hope that the conversation gets to the right places. If we could just get one more thought through on this subject. There are reports to the effect that Nigeria's own ban prior to this time on 25 items, pharmaceutical items and agricultural items, is what has elicited this 14% tariff on Nigeria. I believe the U.S. Trade Representative was speaking to this effect. But is that really plausible when you consider that Nigeria is not alone at the receiving end of these tariffs, as many other countries of the world have also gotten their fair share?
I guess what we could be looking at is there any opportunity that we can identify an alternative market? I mean, so that we're not bogged down basically here because of Trump's decision of introducing tariffs for the different countries, including Nigeria. So what we should be looking at is basically what we are producing in country. Is this something that can be marketed elsewhere? I think the key for me is to look at who would be the other major trading partners. And we could also be looking at what other trading zones can we penetrate into and be able to still trade and export what we are producing, whether they are pharmaceutical or agricultural products or petrol and gas products. But we should be exploring some other trading zones and trading partners globally. And that's, I think, the best that we can do. That's what I would say now.
There you go. Clearly, there's a lot to sit down and talk and act on. But I'm grateful that you're able to give us heads up about how this would affect food security in Nigeria and what must be done to mitigate that effect. We've been speaking with the country director of Oxfam in Nigeria, Mr. John McKenna. Thank you for your time.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
We'll take a quick break now. When we return, we have something special for you, so please stay with us.